So, in the last session, we talked about all the major obstacles that cause traders to not be able to take small losses. And we basically talked about, in no uncertain terms, the kind of terrible effect that'll have on your account balance. But it's not just enough to highlight the problem areas, we also need to come up with solutions for them. And in this session, this is what we're going to do. So, the first solution to all these obstacles: understand and respect market realities. Okay? The reality of the market is that no matter what your analysis is, no matter what major key reference area we're at, no matter how much support or resistance there is, no matter all the different tells, the reality of the market is that despite all of that stuff that's happening, and despite everything pointing into one direction, the reality is that anything can happen at any time. And why? Well, many great traders have pointed to the one simple thing, and it's that even if everything looks a certain way right now, it only takes one major, whatever, trader or hedge fund with some major size to come into the market off the sidelines with a totally different view and screw that whole thing up. And there's actually a famous story of, I forgot where I read it, but of this one trader who was talking to another trader. He was telling him, "This is the low, this is the low." And the other trader goes, "How can you be so sure?" And he goes, "No, I'm positive. Everything points to it. All my indicators, all of my market analysis, this is the low." And so the other trader tells him, "Well, I bet you this is not the low. I'll guarantee you that this is not the low." And the other, the first trader looks, he's perplexed, and he's like, "How could you make such a bet? Of course this is a low." And so the second trader goes to, this was I think a while ago, the second trader goes to the phone, picks up the phone, calls his broker, and he's like, sell 500 contracts at market. And so the sell order comes in, 500 contracts, and obviously what happens, the market just tanks down, and there you have it. It wasn't the low after all. Yes, the second trader put in his market order on purpose because he understood and knew the whole situation, but the bottom line is that this can happen even if that second trader didn't know. He could have just been sitting there at his office contemplating putting in a sell position, and he has $1 billion hedge fund, and all of a sudden he puts it in right then, despite everything looking great, and the market goes down. Now, of course, you can say, well, if that's the case, then how can we ever be sure about any analysis? Well, the reality is you can never be sure about any analysis. It's always probabilities, right? So yes, this time he could do that. 6 out of 10 times he might not, and your analysis works correctly. But if you truly understand this reality, that you can never really predict it, that it can do anything no matter what it looks like is happening, if you understand that and if you respect it, you truly respect the power of the market, the power of it making you extinct in the blink of an eye if you don't respect it, right? If you truly respect this power that it has, then it's almost easy to be disciplined. Like I said, you take it as a given to have stop losses and take small losses, and you're afraid not to. You respect the market too much. You respect the realities of the market too much. Okay? So that's one solution. Once you understand them and respect them, you naturally want to do the right thing because you're too scared not to do the right thing. Now, the second solution is to understand and learn to think in probabilities. And again, we've been touching on this over and over. But when you understand to think in probabilities, what does that mean? That means you don't try to avoid losses. You realize that your strategy has a positive edge, a positive expectancy, and all the losses are already factored in there. They're already factored in, so of course you can afford it. And there's nothing to avoid. They're part of it. You can't tell if the next trade is going to be a winner or a loser. So all you can do is just take it and let it play out. Now, if you're a beginning trader or a developing trader and you don't have a positive expectancy strategy yet, right? So over a large number of trades you will lose money. Well, you still shouldn't try to avoid losses because losses, in this case, are your tuition to learn how to trade the market. There's no other way you're going to learn except through taking trades, making mistakes, and taking losses. We've all been there. And so you have to think of a large number of trades, a series of trades, and not about a specific loss. When you minimize the significance of any specific loss, through also correct position sizing, then you can afford it, you don't have to avoid it, and it's alright. Okay? And the last thing is to understand yourself. And this is the one that's going to affect everything, especially those first two things of the need to be right and the fear of feeling like a failure. But it'll really affect everything. See, it starts with yourself. And if you don't understand yourself, none of this is possible. So what does it mean to understand yourself? What it means is simply to be aware of these issues that are happening inside your mind. Awareness in itself has massive power and momentum. And so when you're aware of your need to be right, okay, when you're aware of your fear of failure, they're no longer in the background being automatically triggered by certain events and forcing you into conditioned behavior. See, that's what happens when you're not aware of something, when you don't bring it to the surface. What's happening is it's running the show on an unconscious level. It's triggering behavior, right? You enter the market, it starts to lose. You start to feel this feeling of I need to be right, if I can't fail. It overtakes you and it makes you act in a certain way. And you're not aware of this. It's all happening on a deeper unconscious level. Right? But when you bring it up to awareness, what happens is that this starts to happen. You've entered the market. Now the loss is coming. You start to feel like you need to not take this loss, like you need to hope. But you remember, wait a minute, this is a natural human emotion, the need to be right and the fear of failure. I'm feeling it now. It's okay to feel it. I don't judge myself. It's not a bad thing. Right? That's how it happens when you understand yourself. It's just awareness. You watch it and you feel it, you let yourself feel it, you're aware of it, and this very awareness makes you much less likely to actually act on it because now it's not driving your behavior unconsciously like a robot that's programmed. So understanding yourself just simply means just watching your mind when these feelings rise, letting them rise and thinking about them, detaching yourself, and it's almost like looking at yourself as a different person. And you feel the feelings and you realize what they mean and you don't judge yourself about them, but you also pause and don't let them automatically affect your behavior. And once you do that, things change. All right? Things change. These feelings never go away. And traders, I think, have this really wrong concept of trying to shut off all emotions. Well, let me give you a newsflash here. You're never going to shut off your emotions. The way to do it is to let yourself feel the emotions without acting on them. Because when you don't give yourself permission to feel them, when you're not aware of them, they're going to force you to act unconsciously. But when you are, that diffuses their power. And that's huge. You got to realize this. And so anyway, once you take all these three solutions together, what ends up happening? Well, what ends up happening is that you now have acceptance of risk and losses. Now you're able to accept the risk before you take the trade. And you're able to accept the loss as it happens. And this is just huge. See, what all those other obstacles were causing is a lack of acceptance of risk and loss. You reject loss, you try to avoid it, and you don't truly accept risk as you enter the trade. But once you've set your stop loss, you've set your position size, you understand yourself and your feelings, you understand and respect the market, you understand and think in probabilities, you naturally accept the risk. And you naturally accept the loss because it doesn't mean you're a failure. And being wrong, quote unquote, is just part of probabilities. And you can afford it. And you're not overconfident about your market reads. And you're not trying to avoid anything. It's all part of the strategy that you know will still make you come out ahead as long as you take those small losses. Okay? I cannot overstate how important this is. Do this right, along with correct position sizing. Do these two things right, and you can make all the mistakes you want. You will still survive, and you will make it. And I'm living proof of that. I made thousands of mistakes when I was starting out in trading. Thousands. And we still continue to make mistakes, even professional traders. But do these two things right. Always take small losses and size your positions appropriately in a small manner, you will survive, and eventually you will learn, and you will have a positive expectancy strategy, and you will start to make money in the market. That's really what it boils down to. And so, what are the outcomes of these solutions? Well, we've just been mentioning them. The outcomes is that, one, you always use a stop loss order on every single trade. You never enter the market without having a stop loss right with that order. And of course, if you want to position size correctly, you can't even do that. If you don't have a stop loss, how do you know what position size to use? You can't, because the very size of the position depends on what your actual risk or stop loss is. It can't be unlimited risk. So that's the outcome, is that you start using a stop loss on every single order. And the second outcome is that you never revise your stop loss while in a trade unless that revision either decreases or keeps the risk constant. And when I say never, I mean never. Ever. Ever. Never. Just in case you didn't get it. I want to be very clear on this. You just never do it. And just to explain this point, when would a revision decrease or keep the risk constant? Okay, well, let's assume you entered long. You bought the market, right? And you had a 3-point stop loss. And now the market starts moving down. And now it's down 2 points. And now you look at it and you go, oh wow, this thing's going to hit my stop. It seems like I'm going to be wrong. I should move it to 4 or 5 points just a little further because I don't want it to be hit. You never ever do that. Okay? Because based on everything else we've just discussed, you accepted the risk and you accept losses. And you respect the market far too much. You know you will come out ahead eventually if you just take this small loss, move on, and never let it become a big loss, because that'll be catastrophic over the long run. Okay? So that's how you're thinking. But now what if you had entered, you have this 3-point stop loss, and you realize that you had put the stop loss 3 points lower, but in reality there's a support level here and actually should be a 4-point stop, for instance. And you're not saying this based on hope or anything, because you realize that, hey, you made an original mistake. Well, sure, you can revise it to 4, but what you have to do is keep the risk constant. And the way to keep the risk constant is you have to correspondingly decrease your position size. You have to now go as if you're entering a new trade. Go, okay, what position size would I be at if I had a 4-point stop, right? And let's assume you were trading 5 contracts at this point based on the 3-point stop, but the 4-point stop tells you should be trading 4 contracts. Well, you got to sell a contract. You got to get out of one contract to keep the risk constant of what it was originally. Okay, you have to do that. Because if you just widen that stop, go, yeah, but it's based on the market, it should be a point wider. And it seems logical. You're not doing it based on fear, you're based on the market, and you keep your risk the same. Or you keep your position size the same, which means your risk is increasing because your stop is larger. What happens there is now you've just given yourself a license to do this all the time. And like what we said earlier, when you believe something, everything will start screwing with your mind. Your mind will start rationalizing, and you'll start doing these things, always making it wider. Yeah, but this is telling me that, so it should be a little wider, so I gotta give it room. You'll start rationalizing it, and soon you'll just have bigger and bigger and bigger losses. Okay? So if you want to do it, fine. But decrease your position size so the original risk stays the same. You're not taking larger risk. That's one. And two, the other time you revise a stop loss is when the market moves in your direction, let's say, and now you want to move your stop loss up, not because you're afraid to have a loss, which is the wrong reason to move a stop loss up, but maybe because the market has moved enough in one direction to now warrant the stop loss moving higher. Because the market shouldn't even come back all the way down to your entry point if it's still in good shape. So now maybe you move it to break even. Alright? So that would decrease the risk, and that's a fine revision. But you never revise it larger. So it's very important to mention, it'll come naturally if you start thinking in terms of the solutions that we talked about. If you respect the market a lot, if you understand yourself, if you think in probabilities, you will naturally always use stops. You'll always respect your stops. When they get hit, you get out, and you never make them larger. All right? So anyhow, we've covered a lot of stuff in this session, but it's a very, very important one. You have to pay so much attention to this. And I hope that, some of the psychological issues that we dug up and some of the solutions will actually help you to be disciplined in this and to take small losses all the time if you've been struggling with it. And if you're new to this, then I hope this instills it deep in your mind that you never even think about not doing it this way. All right? Now, in the next session, we are going to kind of bring everything together, wrap it up under one common umbrella, present a certain concept for bringing everything together, and show you how to implement that so all this becomes just natural for you and you just start doing it effortlessly as a natural part of your trading. So that'll be a great session to get into next.